How many people here have wanted to make a short film? Okay, great, awesome. How many people have ever made a short film? How many people have made a short film and want to make another one? Okay, great. So I take it everyone here is on the acting side of things? Anybody not? Anyone in production? It's okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so we've got a room full of wonderful actors who want to make a short film, be it your first short film or to continue on. So one of the things that's going to be really exciting tonight is an opportunity to get some inside tips as to how these amazing panelists have made films, have worked on things that they created. So let's just say, I'm going to just throw out a couple more categories here, that if you see people, actors who have, oh, wow, they made something and then that got picked up and now it's on Netflix and, you know, you sort of see that and you're like, but how the heck did that happen, right? I mean, sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming. What's the step-by-step thing? And Melissa's so brilliant in creating this kind of programming. Maybe there's something that a character that you know you can play and just simply not represented on your reel. But boy, I love playing that character. I know I can do it, but I don't have a way to show anybody that I can do it. Or maybe you're someone who started writing and then you got stuck and you're like, oh dear, what do I do now? I'm just going to put it in the drawer and just go to an audition or, you know, go out and walk the dog. But whatever it has been that's been an obstacle for you, you're probably not alone. So that's also what we're going to do tonight is get this really valuable information from 3 panelists who did not stop, who maybe stopped temporarily along the way, but instead they kept going. So nice thing is you can watch this back at home, and for all of you at home who are watching this now, welcome. Okay, so let's get started with our wonderful panelists. I'm going to ask if you could please introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself and what inspires you to do your own work. So Leslie, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Mizell. My background, I do a lot of stuff at UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. I don't know if you folks know there or been there. They do a lot of like improv shows and sketch shows, and they definitely want to inspire the constant creative work process, kind of get you in, learn the stuff, do your stuff, then maybe get out of there and work on a show and do your stuff there. So that's a great community to sort of continually create and evolve and write new shows and collaborate and have a community. So that part is really great. What else do you want to know?
Well, I want to know what inspires you to create your own work.
What inspires me to create your own work? Well, to be like on the grounded side of things and total being real in between working, right? So like you book that thing and then you wait and you wait and you wait and you're like waiting until the next thing comes around. So a part of me was like, why am I waiting for someone else to write something for me? I feel like I can create my own work and I want to do it. And also I think you kind of hit on the head a little bit. You'll go out for these roles that you think you're like, I'm perfect for this. And then you don't get it. And it's just like, But it honestly, probably more than 50% of the time does nothing to do with what you did in the room. It just didn't happen. Maybe the project didn't go. A lot of things you don't know. So for me, it was like, I want to play these roles. I can do it really well. Let me see how to find the vehicle for that, find people that I love to work with, and start creating that material. So that keeps me busy in between waiting, for the next project that I didn't create. So it helps to keep that moving. And also getting inspired by people's stories or an event of something that I experienced that I know I'm not alone. Let me write this because maybe someone else can feel connected to. So usually for those reasons, it kind of sparks up the interest, the hunger.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Ella?
Let's see, so I'm Ella here, and I started out primarily as a writer. I've been writing scripts for 30 years, I want to say. I played hooky from school when I was 16 and went to write a screenplay. Eventually I got really good at it. And I always thought that producing and directing is something I would do way, way down the road when I'm old and wise. And by necessity, I had to direct and produce my own work because nobody else was doing that. So, so that's what happened. And then acting was something that I did as a child, and that's the thing I definitely gave up on. Like, there was no way I was going to be acting. But as I started to produce and direct my own work, I'm like, I could cast whoever I want. Like, at some point that occurred to me. And thus my acting career begun. Yeah.
And what inspires you to keep doing your own work now?
What inspires me to keep going is probably the reactions of audiences. When I show my work, I'm reminded that there's a really good reason I'm doing the work. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Caitlin?
Hi, I'm Caitlin Fontana. I'm also primarily a writer. I do perform some comedy as well at the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, which is another one of the comedy theaters in the city. I'm a 2017 Writers Guild of America and Made in New York City Fellowship recipient. That means I'm one of 12 people who was picked to fill a room of fellows, have mentors. My mentor is Julie Klausner, Creator of Difficult People, for our fan out there. Basically we were given 6 months to work on a pilot script in the hopes that writers' rooms in New York City would be filled with more women and people of color. That was the impetus behind creating the fellowship, and I'm in this first year of the program. I primarily come from a TV writing, pilot writing background, but with a long comedy, sketch comedy thrust coming into that. Echoing a lot of the things that have already been said here about creating your own work. I don't perform in most of the things that I write. However, my pilot is about a part of my life that is not something I do anymore, which is I was a music journalist before I became a TV writer. And to me, it's a way to kind of reckon with the demons of the past. That's a big thing that I get out of writing and creating my own work. And, to echo these guys too, it's stories for women, stories for people of color, stories for women over the age of 25 are not frequently written. This is something we all know. And so that's thankfully that tide is starting to change, and we're seeing it happen now. But that was a big reason why I wanted to get into this business, because I thought I had something to add to that conversation. Not even necessarily because I had something profound to say, but that because the impetus was in me to say it. And I think that's enough. I think that's a place where we get stuck, which we can talk about some more. We get stuck at that moment where we think, well, what am I adding to the, especially now, there's a million places where work can be seen. There's a million ways for your work to be shown. And we get stuck in thinking we don't have anything to add to the conversation, but trust me, you do. You're the only person that is you in this universe. So that I like that thought. And you find stories in the most surprising places when you start to trust collaborators and trust the people you're working with and listen to their stories, and great things come out of that.
This is going to be so good.
What she said.
Because just everything that you're talking about, all three of you, is just so, it's just so juicy, So let's just start in one. We got to start somewhere, right? Because we're talking about character. And we're talking about situations. So characters, interesting characters in interesting circumstances, right? So one thing that I just heard you talk about, Caitlin, was about working out demons from the past.
Yeah.
So let's say you sit down and you're like, this is a part of my life. It's very personal to me, but I think there's a lot there. What can you do to help give yourself the courage to be vulnerable enough to be able to tap into that? Because so often we're actors because we want to play anybody else's story. Give me a script, somebody else to play. And what's basically this is going to do is, as a writer coming up with something, write what you know. Can you talk a little bit, and please chime in, anyone here on the panel, about that vulnerability and being willing to go to a place that maybe you're afraid your family or friends, what they might think if they saw the script or saw the film?
Yeah, so for me, starting in journalism and nonfiction writing, I did a lot of essay writing too. I had a great mentor who told me, I wrote a piece about my family, and some family members got angry with me. I think I was 22 or 23 at the time, and I probably didn't do a great job in some ways. I wasn't as thoughtful about other people's emotions as I would be now, perhaps, but I remember I was talking to my mentor about it, and I was pretty upset. And he said, you know, if you don't write about them, they get mad at you. And if you write about them, they get mad at you. So I think either way, I'm not sure if I can swear, but it's going to happen at some point.
Well, you know.
You're kind of fucked either way is what I was going to say. And I feel like you have to, the first step is always to sit down with your thoughts and reckon with them. And keep in mind that that's a very personal process for you. You don't have to show anyone that. It's between you and the page. It's between you and the art. And I've always found that once that first step is taken, every subsequent step to continue to work out the material gets easier and better, and your work gets so much stronger and deeper when you do that. Another good example of that is I remember watching a documentary about stand-up comedians that Louis C.K. was in, and he talked about how he used to do jokes about the weather and things that were happening in his life, and then as time went on, he realized he was running out of things to make jokes about in his life, so he started talking about himself and his pain and his sadness and the scary stuff, and throwing it away in the George Carlin manner. Every year he'd do a whole new hour of that. And I think there's something valuable in that. We get better at rifling through the laundry of our lives as we go along.
I would say that I think that how vulnerable you can be on the page, and you're right that that is the bottom line. That's really our task as writers, is to be willing to do that. That it's always a reflection of what we're able to do in our real life. And so our task, I mean, in general, what we do in our writing is a reflection of our real life. And so we need to, how else to put it except to build the muscle of being willing to kind of rip this open and let at least somebody know what's up. And I actually feel like actors more than anybody have a shot at that, because your job as an actor really is to do just that. It's to rip open. You're being hired to show us the dirty laundry, to just like open up. And you know, the best actors don't ever actually act. It's like you're playing all these characters, but you really are showing your emotional life. So you have a real shot as actors to understand what the job of the writer is, which is the same. It's just you're recording that differently. And I think that that's what you're doing, whether you're writing memoir or whether you're writing fiction. You can be writing about pigs in space, but you're always writing about what's going on for you. So it's like the pigs in space, how they feel, what they're afraid of, what they want, how they feel about each other. It's always a memoir. When it's good writing, it's always a memoir. So it's always about yourself. So yeah, good luck to us. That's a scary thing to do.
I just want to say, isn't that just so encouraging? Like, you've already done a whole bunch of the work. Wow. Isn't that nice? It's not, it's like you can apply that to this. What would you like to add, Leslie?
Well, it reminds me of when I did this comedy show. It was like one of the first ones I wrote, and my parents came to see it, and afterwards my mom was like, "I'm not giving you any more material." And she was like,
you're like, yeah, right.
I was like, but did you, you laughed through the whole thing, right? And she was like, okay, fine, but it's done.
And she did, though, because you just used it.
Oh, I just used it. Yeah. Thanks, Mom, if you're watching. It just never stops. It's all yum, yum. They're crazy. They're amazing. I love them. They're both wonderful. But every time I go home, I'm just like, someone please tell me I'm not alone dealing with this. So I think, and when I do her, I'm actually currently writing something right now where I have them in there. And I think part of it, whether you're doing comedy or drama and you want to put yourself, I think the thing is think about the stories that you love, and they came from a place, and that might, if they didn't tell that story, maybe you wouldn't have be inspired or be here to kind of want to tell your story. So even if you think about it in that way of just being like, you know what, this is my story, and I know I'm not alone. So just going for it. I think being fearless is huge. Like, can you curse? Did you curse already?
Yeah, I said
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I
I don't know.
They have like bleeps.
Is
or
it weird
something.
that I asked and I'm thinking about it and now I'm still gonna curse? I feel like I could have edited that out. But I was gonna say, don't be afraid to fuck up. I think that's the biggest thing of like not being afraid of failure. Like when you're starting and you have this story, it's like, who's gonna be interested in my story? What do I have to say? But you gotta like not feed those demons and you just gotta go for it because that first draft is perhaps I would say 95% of the chance not gonna be great at all. And but you got to get that first one out of the way, not to edit yourself. Your structure might be do an outline first. Your structure might be write dialogue first. I honestly, for me, I don't think that there's a wrong way to go about it. All you could do is try one way. It doesn't work for you. Try another way. I think that's the biggest thing about creating and doing this work. So if you have a hesitancy because you're afraid of like offending someone or what your story is, I would also just say like, you can also go to that person. Like I'm writing something right now. It's just like a heightened version of my life. So I wrote it and then I was like, hey, hun, do you want to give this a read before I give it to other people? Just let me know what you think about it. Because there's some heightened things within our life that I just found interesting. I'm not seeing it on TV. I don't feel like I'm being represented. So I wanted something, at least a project there. And he loved it. He was cool with it. He loved it all. And that made me take the pressure off because I was like editing myself almost before going through it. So depending on like what it is about, you also have that option. You can also be just like, fucking, I'm doing it, and then if it's a hit, they'll love you. So it could go either way. But yeah, so that's what I feel about that.
Do you have people that you have decided now that you can trust to show something to, and making that decision? Because let's say you're writing something, oh, it's crap. Oh, it's crap. The second draft, well, I hate it. But you kind of get to this point is like, is this anything? I mean, when what might be a good way to trust with that vulnerability that you feel? How do you do it now? Do you have a writing partner? Do you have somebody that you bounce things off of? Because that's going to be an important step so you don't stop.
I love collaboration. I don't know how you get, I mean, like, I love it. I love it. I love it. If you find someone that you can gel with and like bounce improv dialogue on and the ideas and you just make each other laugh if you're writing a comedy, like that's the golden stuff. And I feel like a lot of people don't do it. You just feel like you have to do it all yourself and just write. And if that's difficult, especially for actors, because perhaps I might be the only one up here who like started as more of an actor than went into being a writer because of that thing. So my process was very much my writing partner. We would just like improvise dialogue and figure that out that way after doing like a loose outline and an idea. And I think this.
I'm sorry. Can you just say that one more time? This is a little bit of a process now that you're talking about. So first you started with. You first started with dialogue.
Like an idea, but
Okay.
like if we had a scene we'd want to do, then we would like improvise dialogue with each other. And then whatever we thought was like really funny and fun. I mean, we're literally like sitting across from each other like that. She has a laptop, I have a laptop, and we're just like improvising, be like, oh, that's good. Write that down before we forget. Write it down, read through it, and then improvise and write that down. And then we'd have a scene, and then we'd go back and edit it later and stuff like that. But that's why I think collaboration's great. And then when you find those people, so it depends on like if you're beginning writing, you can either, if you have a great friend that's a writer that has that experience, that'll give you the honest truth, be honest. Hey, I just wrote my first thing. Usually I would tend to say, let it be like maybe your second or third draft, just to like go over it, or second draft, just, to see, clean it up just a little bit. Hey, I just wrote the second draft. I know you're busy, but if you don't mind keeping an eye, and I'm looking for like anything you feel comfortable giving me, structured notes. Is this anything? What are you connecting to? And then giving it to someone. So sometimes when I do that, it'll either be like a friend who has writing experience and also a friend that knows me, that like gets my humor. And usually I would say 2 people, or else I'm a little overwhelmed right in the beginning.
Let's say I can answer that a few different ways. First of all, I want to say I love collaborating in every other aspect of filmmaking, and I've never found a writing collaborator. It would be my dream. So that would be a dream come true. And I've not given up on it yet. But I will say that I think isolation is the #1 cause of writing blocks. and that even if you're writing your own thing, you have to break through the isolation. In my case, it's mostly been writers who have trained. I teach screenwriting. And so a lot of the writers I've trained have supported me. I made a point of getting another desk in my room. So there are 2 desks in my room. And I schedule, I have students who don't pay for my classes. The exchange is they come and work in my office. And yeah, I need babysitters.
And that's to keep you writing.
Yeah, so
Wow,
I'm writing
isn't that
if somebody's
interesting?
working alongside with me. And what we do is like, we'll write for half an hour and then we listen to each other 2 minutes each and just get to talk. So you're just kind of breaking out of this little cell you're in.
And when you talk to each other for those 2 minutes, is it about what you wrote, or is it just basically getting out of it and just being with another human being for a few moments?
It's about what you're writing.
About what you're writing, okay.
Yeah, and depending on my relationship, there are people where I can actually talk through the story and be like, I can't figure out the spot, and I can talk about it, and we take a walk, and blah, blah, blah. And then I have one friend, it was only one person I could have ever done this with, he's actually here right now, where I was totally blocked, and I had a deadline. And we went away for a weekend, and I had him sitting there looking at the screen while I was writing. And
That's a good
kept me
friend.
going.
Wow. Yes.
But I think, and a lot of what I do teaching writing is guiding writers to move out of that isolation. And again, this is where actors can really have a leg up because, as Leslie was saying, you know how to write when you improvise. I mean, improvising and writing is the same activity. It's the same activity. So, yeah, I think improvising together and coming up with material that way is like, amazing.
I just want to just take just a little second to say, you know how to write when you improvise. That's what you just said. I love that because you're already writing, you're just not writing it down. And all day long, we never know what we're going to say. You might know what you're going to say when you go, you know your lines when you go in for an audition, but you don't know what you're going to say to that casting director before the little chit chat before you get into the work. You don't know. You make that up, so all day long, even though we're actors and working at, being in character and being in these roles, we also have so much of our lives where we're already writing because we're improvising, because we're living life. So part of it is capturing that.
Yes, it's about capturing it. I'll say to piggyback on that, the only Stephen King book I ever read was the one he wrote on writing. And he doesn't plot things out. He says that he discovers what the ending is as he writes it. And I do approach writing that way. I discover the story. So if I have a plan, it's just like my best guess at what a story might be, but I actually think that narrative writing is very similar to documentary filmmaking. Like you have the subject in mind and you might have some ideas about it, but then you shoot footage on the ground and you discover it as you're shooting it, right? And then you take it to the cutting room and you figure out the story. I think narrative writing is the same thing. You have an idea in mind and you have a subject, you have some ideas about it, but you don't know till you write from the heart by inspiration, like what unfolds. And then I talk to my students like you're creating raw footage. Then you take that footage, all the stuff you wrote, and then you figure out how to edit and structure it and put it together. But if you're thinking like structure and you're plotting it out in advance, you're not improvising. You're not writing from the heart. And so if you know how to improvise, you're a writer. You're totally a writer.
And I would just add to that, I think it's true that we do improvise in our daily lives all the time, but it's based on so much information that we've acquired over our lives. It's based on social cues. It's based on emotional reactions. It's based on whether or not we want to sit in the front row anymore. So I feel like another tool that's good for that is like capital I improv training at the UCB or at the Pit or places like that, because it does really, and this isn't me trying to sell classes because I don't teach anymore, but I do come from that background, and I've spent 16 years now doing improv, and I do a weekly show at the Pit as well, and that keeps my writing muscle really sharp, and part of that is the training that has taught me how to interpret the information that my scene partners are giving me in such a way that it creates a scaffolding on which to hang character information, relationships, emotional reactions, all that stuff. And you learn that in that room. And I feel like I'm sure many of you as actors have done some form of improv training. And I think that that's so valuable for writing as well, because it does, when someone says to me, just figure it out, that's crazy to me, even though I've been figuring it out forever. But there's something to be said about actually practically exploring creation through a designated channel like improv, capital I improv classes, that allows you to suddenly you see the way that you approach topics differently. It becomes less daunting and scary. It becomes less like I could do anything in the world, and more like, oh, I can do anything in the world, which is it's been a great tool for me. I totally recommend it.
Yeah, I'll also just add, I feel like it ignites such imagination of where characters can go. Like, if that makes sense, because when you're improvising or when you're writing, I just think the tool of improv, you just realize, oh my God, I could do anything with these people right now. And that, like, anything at all. Like, you know what? They're gonna do anything. Like, go to jail, and then they're gonna go to a Kenny Loggins concert, and then they're gonna get high, and then they're gonna have sex at a Kenny Loggins concert. I don't know, whatever. But it's just like that. Whatever your voice is, and your
that sounds great, by the way.
It sounds great. Yeah, that's in a new show coming out soon. It just got picked up. Oh God. It's called Getting High, Kenny. So I just think that that's what's the cool thing about imagination. So you don't have to, you can always think what else, and not run out of ideas, and also hopefully not edit them as you go and explore what can happen.
And I think this really goes right in the face of one of those negative thoughts where we say, everything's already been done. Every story's already been told. It feels like that, like finding the gold within you is a way to combat that. Please.
Yeah, no, I'd love to speak to that. I think one mistake, and it definitely leads to writing blocks, is thinking you need to be original. I tell writers all the time, do not be original. Firstly, everybody's trying to do that, so not an original goal. But it's not a good goal. What is a good goal is being authentic. Is writing what's really true to you, again, whether it's a memoir or Pigs in Space.
That one just got picked up.
Yeah,
I just
good.
heard that.
Yeah.
I think so.
The back-to-back with
I just got an alert.
to the Kenny Loggins concert.
So
yeah.
The Kenny's in there.
When you're writing authentically, when you're writing something that really moves you, that's you, it will automatically be original. As Caitlin said, there's only one person like you in the world. So it will automatically be original, and it will also automatically be universal. Because when you're writing authentically, you're going to hit all the things that we all struggle with. So I find in authenticity that writing becomes original and universal. So it's authenticity you want, not originality.
One thing I wanted to add earlier, just about the collaborators thing, I think it's really great to have people around you, and I frequently have people around me, which I feel very grateful for, who get me, like you say, who know me, who like my work, who think I'm funny, and that's good too, but it's also good to have the occasional person around you who doesn't, or who comes from a different place, or who maybe can't see what it is about your work, because that can be really instructive too. It can be a little damaging at the beginning of the process, so I wouldn't necessarily invite it in at that point. But and it doesn't mean they're adversarial to you necessarily. It just means they come from a different place. So, for example, in our in the Writers Guild fellowship, we have writers' rooms made up of the fellows that we give each other feedback, which is wonderful, and a version of that collaboration. And our room is the comedy room, and there's also a drama room. And one of the drama writers, Sarah Krause, who's brilliant, decided she wanted to come and hang out in our room too and read our scripts and give us feedback. And we were like, of course. And she gave me a note on my script that I don't think anyone else in the room would ever have thought of, not because they were lacking something or anything like that. It's just her way of thinking about structure is much more based in drama. And the way that she saw my script was just inherently different. And so there's something to be said about that too. Especially, as actors, and I love actors, we tend to find, this is true of everybody, we find our tribe, right? We find the people that we like the most who like the same stuff as us. So find some people that don't and cultivate those relationships too, because that's where some of the most surprising opportunities come from as well, is people that you wouldn't necessarily, inherently choose. And one of those things that I will say that seems obvious, but I feel like it bears mentioning in this context is like, if you're looking around and you're a white person and you're surrounded only by white people, you're doing it wrong. So that's a good place to start. And that doesn't mean you go out looking for your black friend. Of course, it doesn't mean that, but it means like, what are you doing? What stories are you telling? Who are you engaging in the community, and who are you engaging in your writing and in your life that you're missing that complete swaths? And same thing, if it's all dudes, you're missing so much of the story. If it's all women, you're doing it right. But no, you know what I mean? Like, we tend to kind of create a comfortable environment, especially in a city like New York that eats you alive. It's a slaughterhouse out there. We tend to create the most comfortable version of like the human candle in our life that we can light and sit in the bath and be like, you make me warm and happy. But we should bear in mind what stories we're missing and what characters we're not being in touch with and what parts of ourselves we're not reaching out to when we subtract the opportunities to work with other people.
Wonderful. I was wondering about deadlines, how you use them to help you move forward, and how someone who's just starting out with a story might use a deadline in a kind way to, get something done, because we can think about ideas, dream about ideas, but never put them on paper, or it's just never good enough, or that kind of a thing that just becomes a slog that you live in, So talk about deadlines for yourselves and how it might be best used for someone who's starting out writing their first or their next short.
It's so funny. I just had this conversation with my manager because I'm writing something. And I was like, I had a table read on August 25th and give myself a month to like go through everything and process it, and then I'll write. And she looked at me, she's like, do you ever think about shorter deadlines? And I was like, oh, okay. You mean like write faster? And I was like, I thought a month was pretty short to process things. But I don't know. I thought that was funny because you asked that and that just happened. But I need deadlines. I need accountability for sure. I was like in a funk of writing and all that stuff, and I reached out to this guy, Scott Reynolds, who does like pilot writing, and he had just moved, and I have a 3-year-old, so the chances of me taking a class or something like that is just not going to happen at the moment. But I was like, I need something to just get me started. So he has like a 6-week thing, and we did it through video. That's a word. We did it through video at like Skype, one of those things. Now all of a sudden I said mom, and I'm like, Skype, and what is that thing? So we did it, and I got it done. I got a pilot done in 6 weeks. I did have like a basic idea beforehand, but I didn't have like anything other than a basic idea. In 6 weeks, at the end of it, I had 30 pages. Was it like ready to be read by somebody? I don't know. But I felt like for me, I just needed accountability. So that deadline is good for me. So if you're just starting, I think it's also find someone, like even in here, if you know someone, or even if you talk afterwards and you're like, hey, listen, you guys know each other. I see you doing that. So if you both want to write, look at each other and say, listen, how about let's find out what works for us. We know we want to write, right? So every week for an hour, or for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes, call each other and say, hey, did you write anything today? Just give me like a brief thing of what you wrote. Or did you come up with some characters? Or just pitching ideas to each other. And then after about a month, if you feel like, you know what, this is going on a little too long, let me up the ante a bit. Because I think when you're beginning, you don't know, or I didn't know. So it's just like finding those people. For me, it was like finding someone to be accountable with, accountable for. I know if I'm going to spend money on it, I'm going to do it. So that's why I did that class thing, because I didn't want to waste that money or that time.
Yeah, I just want to say, as a writing teacher, people's need for a deadline has made me a lot of money. I just give those out freely. Yeah, what do I want to say? It's funny, the two people you pointed out were both my writing students, and they've gone
Oh,
on
no
writing
way.
dates.
Oh, you have a deadline already.
Well,
What
I
are
send
writing
my
dates?
students on writing dates.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
What's that?
So I do think that writing with company, I was talking about that, makes all the difference. And I send writers to meet together. I say if you live within 30, 40-minute commute, you should meet in person. Hotel lobbies are great. They don't make you buy anything. They have plugs. Just don't wear anything wrinkled, and they'll let you sit there as long as you do.
Starbucks used to be that way, and then they covered up all their plugs.
Well, they also freeze you in
Did you
there.
hear
'Cause
that?
They don't want you to stay there. But anyway.
Or drink more coffee.
Hotel lobbies, each other's houses, whatever, coffee shops. And if I have found consistently that when people have a regular writing date once a week, that's the difference between writing and not writing.
Ooh, can we just stop for a second? That's the difference between writing and not writing. Having once a week an accountability to write.
Yeah, and
And that muscle you talked about, like working that out, you had mentioned before.
The being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you have to talk about your writing every 30 minutes to an hour. You do 2 minutes each. No, but I think when we, I think company is bigger than accountability. It does more. Like accountability takes me part of the way, but having company is what takes me to the finish line when I really get stuck. And lastly, I'll say that, I mean, my deadlines are all self-imposed. And I more use goals than deadlines. Like I say to myself, this is what I'm accomplishing this year. I try to keep it to like just one goal. Like as in, in terms of my filmmaking, here's the thing that I want to see happen this year. And I'm very methodical about it. Like, so what does that mean needs to happen this month? And if that happens this month, what are the 3 things I have to do this week? And I schedule them and I stick to them. And I find that, in other parts of my life, I don't need goals the same way. There's something about doing artwork where it's so easy to forget that what you're doing is important. And everything else, seems like it should take precedence, and there's obligations and responsibilities. And so as an artist specifically, like setting goals is what keeps me on track.
I'm a much more pathological creature than you are, I think. I would love to say that the work fuels itself, and in some cases it does. And one thing I will say in the grand sort of like 10,000 hours thing, you guys know about 10,000 hours by now? The Malcolm Gladwell principle that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you're like an expert or whatever. We'll see. Yeah. But I think that within that framework, it's easy to, it does get easier as you do it more. It becomes a muscle, you work it. However, for me, I've come up with a complex system of very internalized guilt and reward matrices that I'm constantly feeding like a furnace. So for me, and I'm only saying this now, I've never said this in public before, so you're welcome, because I know there's some of us, when I was in school, I had friends like yourself who are very dedicated. They like get up in the morning, they write for 4 hours, they do things. And I know it's not always that way. I know you're laughing because it's like, you're like, no, I'm not always this, but you are. It's clear to me that you're very accomplished. For me, it's just a shit show a lot of the time. So what I have to do is guilt myself like crazy, whether it's booking some sort of live show where I have to have something ready for presentation within a month or 2, and this works for a lot of comedians.
Oh God, yes.
Because then you
put
have
that pressure
to do it.
on you. You have to do it.
Or you have to cancel and disappoint a lot of people.
So many people.
Which is the guilt factor.
Yes.
And having an accountability buddy who, if your friend who lives in New Jersey and has a baby somehow managed to write his script, but you're just somebody who sits around and drinks wine and you didn't, then you feel guilty. That works. The other thing is rewards, And I think we were talking about your thing of you write for 30 minutes and then you discuss your work. For me, it's like I write for 30 minutes and then I get to watch like an episode of Rick and Morty. And then I'm like, good for me. And then I go back to it. And the real underlining thing is, I'm being a little facetious here, but whatever works. And I used to get so uptight and hard on myself about not doing things the same way that my colleagues would do it. I have novelist friends who churn out like an entire new novel a year, and I just beat myself up for taking so much longer to do something. But you just have to be gentle with yourself as well. And if you miss a deadline, don't, self-flagellate until you're bleeding. Like, be gentle with yourself. Take into account who you are and what you've been going through. And that makes the work better too, because you're not so pent up and tight. You're actually allowing the work to work with you, not against you.
I got to clear my name on one account.
Hey, please do.
I just want to say that I meet my goals on my timetable a good 3% at a time.
Okay.
But
I feel way better.
but having them keeps me stepping.
Yeah.
It just keeps me moving. Yeah.
I love that. Caitlin, have you found other writers in the writer room now that are giving you tips on how does everyone sit around there pretending that it's so easy for them to come up with ideas? No. Or are they sharing with you ways that they've been able to overcome some of the obstacles?
I think we experienced them all sort of in real time in the room. For us, the part of this program is we're all working on the same script that we came in with. So now many of us, myself included, my pilot I've been working on the same project now for almost 2 years, which is normal in television, and it's probably gonna go on for a lot longer. So that's another reason to write things that you care about and not to try and manufacture an idea for what you perceive to be the marketplace, because you're gonna spend a lot of time with the story, and the story is you. So if you can't hang out with yourself for a while, you're in trouble. So you should be writing the things that make you happy for that reason. But to answer your question, I think what's been really great is anything like a writer's room or a collaborative environment just makes you not alone. And there is a part of the process where you do have to be alone for it, and you have to get comfortable with the lonely part of it too. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but you have to get comfortable with it, because that's the foundation of what we do is sitting in front of a computer or a pad of paper, whatever way you like to write, and it's you and the work. So anything you can pad yourself around with that helps that is great. And the more people you spend time with who are also going through the same trenches, that's the most useful thing, is we're all working on the same goals in a loose sense, which is creating this one thing. And the more time we spend together, the more you see like, oh, I have this crazy pent up weirdness around this one idea, and then someone else will have the same thing. And you'll see that kind of happen. But more importantly, it's so much easier to solve someone else's problems than your own. And then doing that works the muscle of like, oh, that problem wasn't actually so big when I drilled down on it, so maybe mine isn't either. And then, like I say, a colleague in a good room, everyone's very generous, and that's why you should always be generous with your time. Read other people's work when they ask you, because you want the same thing from them. Yeah. In a perfect system, it does become an ecosystem, The rain falls on the soil, and the soil grows the plants and creates the rain, like the whole thing goes in a cycle, and it's easier and better to do that if you create this collaborative spirit.
You just said something that it's not really on the subject, but when you were talking about reading stuff, just one thing I wanted to say, I know that I was like, oh, a lot of scripts are online that I could read. Well, what kind of stuff do I love? So for me, like structure-wise, or just when you said that, I guess I just wanted to mention, you can go online, and if you're like, I love Modern Family, or I want to write something like that, or Game of Thrones is my jam, go online and start reading scripts, I just finished reading Independent Ed, which is like a phenomenal book to read, because he talks about how he would watch his favorite films and with the sound off to see the camera shots, as like how they would do that, and kind of learn how setups would be done. And I guess I kind of did the same thing with scripts, because I was like, I want to know the structure of Modern Family. I can read what a 2-camera thing is supposed to be like, and a one camera, and this and that. But I just needed to visually see it and see how many pages and where are the jokes and what's the structure. And so I don't know. I was just throwing that out there and reading scripts.
That's wonderful.
But also you doing that.
I would say, first of all, in my experience, almost everybody has ideas for movies. And so people are not lacking ideas. The hard thing is execution, right? Mm-hmm. I say to people, don't make the mistake of committing to the first idea you came up with, which is what a lot of new writers do. They have an idea, and that's what they write. I would say, come up with 10 really bad ideas, come up with lots of ideas. There's so many things to consider, in terms of, those 10 ideas, which one is most conducive in terms of, small budgets. Mm-hmm. Lots of things to consider. So come up with lots of ideas. And the one thing I say to my students all the time is to follow the fun. that the stuff that's really fun for you to write, the stuff that's really easy for you to write, that just writes itself, that's the stuff you should be writing. A lot of people, like when they find their voice as a writer, they immediately start writing something else because they don't want to be like pigeonholed in that style or whatever. It's like, dude, that's your style.
That's your thing. That's your
style.
voice.
You found it. You found it.
Yeah.
So the thing that's really easy for you to write, where you feel like you're not doing any work and you're guilty about it, that's your voice.
That
That's
is
your
it.
writing. That's what you should be writing.
And we talk about that at improv all the time.
Yeah,
We just looked
follow
at
the
each
fun.
other when you said follow the fun.
Yeah, that's an improv.
Because that's all that we do. We follow the fun. And that's what I was saying when you're writing with someone and it makes you laugh. Oh my God. Like, if it cracks you up and you're writing with someone or just
Yeah.
cracks you up, like that is the magic. Like that's the stuff that you write down and you follow. And don't steer away from it. Don't be like, oh, I gave him that. Now I'm not going to give him any more of that. Like that would be crazy. Like that's the stuff that we want.
Yeah, and I would say between two things that both of you just said kind of inspired something in me that I forgot completely that I would do years ago. That is actually a good exercise when you're starting to explore ideas. You talked about getting stuck on the first idea and kind of working that. And tell me if you find this to be true, because I've taught some stuff too, that people come in with their idea and they're like, well, like if it was Game of Thrones was their idea, they'd be like, so it's all these different groups of people and they fight. And you're like, okay, but what's it really about? And that kind of, what you were saying too, it made me think, go home and like think about your 10 favorite whatevers, TV shows, movies, whatever. Write down, it's about X, but it's really about X. Because if you say it's a Game of Thrones, it's about a Game of Thrones. Like who's gonna sit on the Iron Throne is really what the show's about. Spoiler. But it's really about families. It's really about the complexity of families, how they love, hate, fuck one another. That's really what the show's about. And so, another example would be like Breaking Bad. It's a show about a chemistry teacher who starts making meth because he's got cancer and he wants to leave some money behind when he dies. But it's really about a man who'll do anything to protect his family. That's where we sort of get tripped up on our ideas, is because we have some big lofty idea or some high concept thing that we think is going to sell or be amazing because, it's big and huge and it's about pigs in space. But it's not
You're
really
not using
about
the Kenny
that's an amazing
Loggins. I'm just a little
concept.
upset.
yeah,
The
I'm
Kenny
sorry.
Loggins thing I threw out there. That,
Well, I mean, the emotion of Loggins is obvious,
come on.
so I don't feel like
Celebrate
I need to
me
drill
home,
down.
guys?
Yeah.
mean.
But I encourage you to do that, because you'll start to see that the things that you don't love them for the reason that you necessarily think you do, which is the marketing that's been thrown at you about something, that it's sexy, that it's this, that it's that. You love it because it has this generation of character and story and emotion that you maybe don't even realize you're being sort of taken along on this journey. And so when we have these ideas, like you say, ideas are multiplicitous, like they're all over the place. We find the idea. So it's about Kenny Loggins and getting high at a Kenny Loggins concert, but it's really about a couple who loves each other more than anything.
Right.
Or whatever. So yeah.
Well, we get stuck in like what we should be writing. Like you want to write something that's smart, or you want to write something that's original. I spoke to that before. And we need to write the dumb stuff, because that's the stuff that's coming from here. And often with my students, I ask, like, what was your favorite movie before you were 8? Because back then we weren't as, all knotted up about what we're supposed to like. We were a little more honest.
And playful.
Yeah.
I think it allows you to be free and be
really good
and play.
advice I got from a writing teacher in college 100 years ago was that think of your favorite movie and write it. And if you write your favorite movie, it'll come from you, and it'll be a new movie that's never been written. Like, just be dumb. Yeah, don't write smart things.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, like, drill down. That's awesome, because I would also say drill down in that movie that you loved before you were 8. What's your favorite scene? Write that scene. Drill down, get even smaller. Take the smallest unit you can think of, like just a run of dialogue. 3 or 4 sentences back and forth. Can be really revealing about what you love about writing and what your writing would be.
I just realized that my film Tomorrow Ever After is actually my version of Mary Poppins. That was my favorite movie.
Ed Burns talks about that a lot in his book too. Just independent Ed of that thing of like, what is your favorite movie, and then what's your voice? And I know I love that movie, so what is that movie in my voice? And that's how a lot of his movies, like, it was inspired by his favorite films. So that's such a great point.
As far as structure, what we're talking about is writing a short film. So when you're looking at your character and the circumstances, how might it be a good idea to be looking at the length of something as to be able to say this is, well, I want to write this whole long story, a feature, but really I'm making this in the container of being a short. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some ideas so we can rein ourselves into a short, but how that might work with the writing process?
Go for it.
Anyone?
Okay. Let's see. So, I mean, you know, film festival-wise, the sweet spot is 8 to 9 minutes. That's what's most likely to get programmed. Blah blah blah. That's 8 to 9 minutes.
8 to 9 minutes
is
yeah.
the sweet spot. Yeah, in terms of being most likely to be programmed. That said, you need to write the best and make the best short you can make. And so if your best short is, you know, my short was 17 minutes with credits, and everyone was like, ah! And I tried to shorten it, and it wasn't as good a short. So I kept it the length it needs to be. So you want to make the best possible short. That is the sweet spot, 8 to 9 minutes. Here's the thing. When we were back there before we came on here, I think it was Melissa who was talking about all these shorts that are so beautifully shot and all this production value, but the story was like, you know. And here's the cheapest trick in the book. The difference between a premise and a story. A story is somebody trying to achieve something and something's in the way. So when we watch somebody trying to achieve something and something's getting in their way, we are going to be watching it because we're going to want to see if they're going to achieve this thing. If we're just watching somebody sitting by a lake house discussing the meaning of life,
On Golden Pond? Is that what you're talking about? No,
I
I'm
don't
kidding.
remember it.
I don't either, but I just.
But
went there.
anyway, see, now I lost my tree. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It was
Story and
brilliant.
premise. Story and
Really?
premise.
You're going into premise idea on the pond, talking about life.
Yes. Every once in a while, you'll see a film that gets away with a premise without a story, but they're far and few. Most of the films that don't hold our attention, it's because there was this really cool premise, maybe even a really cool character, but there isn't a story. What turns something into a story, and you want this in your poster, and you want this in your pitch, and you want this in your log line, is to communicate that somebody's trying to achieve something and something's in the way. So not, you know, somebody is reconnecting with an estranged dad, but somebody's trying to get their estranged dad to come to their gay wedding. So now you have a goal, and there's going to be obstacles. That's the difference between a premise and a story.
Wonderful. I love that. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the story of someone's trying to achieve something and something's in the way. Obstacles. Okay, so things that might come up for people. We've talked a little bit about it, about writer's blocks, things like that. But what are ways that you have found that are going to be, because everybody's different. You know, you talked about having somebody sit with you. You talked about writing dates. So we've also talked a little bit about our own personal roadblocks that we get. If it's too personal, if someone in the families or friends are going to hate it, love it. So, you know, obstacles, because we want something to happen. We have a deadline. Let's say even just for the short film festival submission for next year. So we're going to come up with obstacles. People are going to leave tonight and go home and say, wow, that was really great. What can put you into action so that the obstacle of procrastination tomorrow or for the weekend, like now, can you talk a little bit about pushing through that, somebody who wants something, making that happen?
You mean like how to leave here, what is going to make somebody go home and write?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, I do. I have my laptop with me. I moved to Long Island a year and a half ago, still getting used to the burbs. But I bring my computer with me and I write on the train because that's like my office hours. How many people are here with someone that they know, sitting next to somebody that they know? Raise your hand. Yeah. And how many? And you guys are here together. Are you both writers? Actors, writers. They want to write.
We're actors, and I want to write.
You okay?
I'm a former writer.
Actor who wants
Actor.
to
I'm sorry.
write.
What? actor, former writer, want to start again. And you're
Once a writer, always a writer, just FYI.
Yeah. Writer. So, and you are actor, want to write as well? Yeah? Cool. Could you guys call each other, have a week, 1 week, start pitching ideas, call each other, pick a day and a time? No, I'm serious.
The answer is yes.
I'm serious. Do you want to do it? Yeah, right? So what's today?
Thursday.
Today's Thursday. So next Thursday, pick a time, put it in your book, and you're going to connect with each other. And you're going to say, hey, I've been sitting on this idea. You're writing it down, putting it in your phone. Cool. So I feel like that's the step one. Like, let's just do it, right? You both want to do it. There's no other time. Like, life is short, right? So what is stopping people? Just go for it. I'm saying if you're here with someone and you want to do it, and I felt like you're not even sure if you want to write, but maybe give it a shot. You want to write? You were just like, I don't know. You did your short. Hey, cool. So on to the next one. Right, guys? That's great. I'm not going to do that with everyone here, but that's like an example of just what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? You guys are here. That's ahead of a lot of people who aren't here. So if you don't know somebody and you don't think you have anybody, there's a room full of people who didn't raise their hand, who you might be sitting with, someone you don't know. Say hi. Get their email if you don't want to give a phone number, and research them on Facebook, and do it. I don't know, just do it.
Yeah, and I would say, too, don't be precious. It's so easy to be precious about art making in so many ways. And I feel like we need to treat it more like a manufacturing scenario. And that isn't to say we're churning out, widgets or whatever. That's a real cool contemporary reference, guys. But I think there's something, we're taught from a young age, I feel, that artists or writers specifically are like these marvelous creatures that sit under a tree and wait for things to come to them, and that's just not true. You do have to find your own way in. Things like morning pages, if you've ever done The Artist's Way, can be helpful to a lot of people.
Yes.
For me, didn't work. Didn't like it, hated it. Made me mad, I would throw my pen across the room. Again, I'm saying a complicated
that
system
means it was working.
Right. A complicated system of guilt and reward is what I prefer, but it took me years to find that. So you can't know what's going to work for you unless you start. And that's the thing, is we've learned how to do so many things in our lives, and why we're so precious or reticent to just dive into something like this is because we're afraid that what we're going to make is shitty, and it will be, until it isn't. And so you have to start. And it's the hardest thing in the world until you're doing it. It's you stepping into the bathwater full of ice, and then once you're in it, it warms up because you get used to it.
It's just getting out of your comfort zone, just shaking it up.
I'll say a couple things about writing blocks. I spoke to the isolation, which I think is the #1 cause of writing blocks. And the weekly writing date makes a big difference. The other one is, as Caitlin was saying, it's the insecurities. Most of the time, we're not aware of them. Like when I feel insecure about my writing, I don't go, oh, I'm not any good. I say, well, what's on Facebook, and can I get a snack? Right? So we're not, translation, I'm scared to write. So let's see. We've all gotten feedback that was well-intended that damaged us, and we've all underestimated what it did to us. I'll give you an example from a painting class I was in, and I was really loving my painting, and this guy walks by and he goes, wow, amazing painting. I don't know about the green though. And I didn't realize till 2 years later that I stopped using green in my paintings. That stuff goes in and we're not even aware of it. So I do say protect yourself in terms of feedback. Company, yes. But in terms of feedback, what I have my students do is we go around the room and people have to say what they like about the work, and the writer has to write it down, because those are the things we don't hear. We're only going to hear the problem, right? So you have my permission to tell all your friends when you share your work that your teacher said that they're only allowed to tell you what they like about it. And you really just need one person who knows the craft, like the actual craft of it, to give you constructive feedback. Everybody else is just going to give you a list of what they like and don't like, and they'll say it in very vague terms that are just going to discourage you. Like, I don't feel like I care about the character. Well, how do you fix that? It's like, that. I'm sorry you don't care about the character. You know, like, how do you even begin? So you don't want that kind of feedback, and you do need to protect yourself and just ask people for what they like. There is an article on my blog, theindependentfilmschool.com, on how to give and receive useful feedback. Also on theindependentfilmschool.com, I have a crash course there that delves into writing and writing blocks. So there are actual writing exercises there that you can use.
Wonderful. I'd like to just address very quickly before we start doing the questions. Make sure you've handed in your questions if you'd like them. Just I think that Melissa's right over there, and she'll pick them up for you. So the thing is, I was wondering about, is the constraints, or would it be an advantage or not to be thinking of as you're writing this, starting out, what the project might cost. For instance, I need a lot of special effects. I need to, film it at the White House. Just like places that might be a problem.
At an airport.
To get, into. I mean, I'm just thinking, do you say to yourself, I need to do this within the, constraints of what my budget or my time is going to be? How do you deal with that yourselves?
Well, I am a producer and a writer. But at any given point, I'm one or the other. So I'll think like a producer, and I'll say, well, this is their budget. We have 3 locations. These are the 3 locations that we have. Who's the writer I really like? Ella, why don't you write the script? And then me as a writer accepts the assignment. And then I have to be a writer. And so I write by inspiration, and oh my God, we have 7 locations. And then I bring my script to my producer, and I say, isn't this a great script? And then I'm a producer, and I look at the script, and I say, yes, very good script. But we are going to have to eliminate these 2 locations. I'll settle, fine, we'll do 5. And so when I'm writing, I need to be writing. If I'm thinking about budget while I'm writing, writing is an emotional activity, like acting. If as an actor, you're thinking about the craft while you're acting, you look like an actor, right? You have to think like, I'm in love with this person, or I'm jealous of this person, or I hate this person. You have to be in their shoes. And writing is the same thing. I have to be in somebody's shoes and have an emotional experience. I can't be thinking about an outline, and I can't be thinking about a budget. So I have to be a writer and let myself have that. And then when I finish the work as a writer, I bring it to the producer, this one, and then I can think like a producer and say, no, you can't be in the airport, and the subway scene has to be at a bus stop, and then I think like a producer.
There's a really great book called How Not to Make a Short Film by Roberta. It's escaping me right now, but she used to be the programmer for short films at Sundance. So she has tons of experience of watching shorts and judging them by various merits. And it's a really great, anytime I'm going to start something, a filmmaker friend of mine, a director friend of mine told me about it. And anytime I'm starting something new, I kind of refresh that. Even just as a writer, which the book is largely not really, it is a bit about that, but it's mostly about the full scale of the process. And you find that, again, it's like anything, the muscle, again, and like playing the piano, you're playing with 2 separate hands. At a certain point, and tell me if this is true too, you are a little bit more able to incorporate some of those thoughts as you're moving through the story too. Because also you get better at saying, well, what is, again, the scene's about a bus stop, but it's really about these 2 people talking to each other. So does it need to be in this location for that same emotional weight to happen? Probably not. So it does get easier over time as you build that stuff. And also making your own stuff, because I run an intersectional feminist comedy show called The Box. We have a live show on October 28th at Littlefield in Brooklyn, if you would like to come. And one of the things that I've done through that is directed probably something like 45 sketches at this point. And every time we make a new video sketch, we get better at streamlining the process of that, because we're kind of self-funding everything. And as you do that, you just get better at knowing what this thing needs. And usually it doesn't need 75% of what you think it needs once you get to the end.
Yeah, but I would say if you're beginning, not to think about any of that stuff, only because I feel like it would just make you edit stuff before you get it down on the page right away, where you're starting to judge, well, is this right? How is this going to get done? And is this the right way? And is this what they need? So that's the only thing I would say. I know when I was starting, if I thought about all that stuff, I wouldn't get it down.
I have several feature scripts that are brilliant, and I can't produce them. They're studio films, I can't produce them. And I've had to learn over the years, like, how to write for a budget that I can actually realistically gather, so.
That's a good title for a book.
What is it?
Which title?
What you just said.
My scripts are brilliant.
Your scripts are brilliant. Yes, that one. What am I thinking? No, it was long, but I loved it. Okay, we'll watch the tape back.
Yeah.
How to get your
How to
write for a budget you can realistically gather.
Yeah,
There
something
it
like
is.
that.
love
There's
it.
got to be an acronym
Small
there.
counterpoint. Sorry, I know we're moving on to questions, but small counterpoint to that is a piece of advice I got from Julie Klausner, my mentor in the program, is when I was working on it, she's like, why didn't you do X? I think it was something about a flashback and something about music. It's a very musical script. She's like, why didn't you put exactly what song you want? I'm like, oh, well, because we'd never be able to afford to put it in there. And she said, no, do it all. And that was freeing too, to then release that thought and go into it being like, if I could make anything out of this script, what would that look like? And what would I do and where would I go with it if I could do that? Because you can always pull back, and there's going to be a million people, producers, whoever, will go, yeah, we can't do this, we can't buy this song, we can't do that. Let them do that later, because so much came out of the story by me letting myself just do that.
And I will add, I have made it a policy to only write things I could actually produce, and that's mostly what I write, but every once in a while, I'm a writer, and sometimes you just gotta lay that egg. Like, I had a animated musical in my head, and it's just had to end up on the paper, and so I spent a long time working on that script, knowing that I may never, ever see it produced. I had to write it.
Yeah. Well, it's like you gave yourself the permission and the opportunity to explore it, and who knows, you have that script ready for when something else gets made or you meet the right people.
Or in your packet. Like if someone wants to see your stuff, then all of a sudden you're staffed on a show.
Animated musical.
Yeah, that animated musical show. They want to see a writing sample.
A feminist animated musical.
I just want to make a quick announcement. There were a lot of really awesome questions about structure and producing and specific logistical questions. This is a full series, so we're going to have whole entire panels focus on a lot of these specific questions. So I will hold on to them and hang on to those. This one's specifically about writing idea generation. So we're going to focus on those questions tonight. I'm holding on to your other ones, and we're going to build panels around those questions that you have. Cool?
Thank you, Melissa. Isn't that great that you created a series so we can get to those things? But, you got to get started somewhere, right? And that's tonight. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'll get to all the questions that I can. So we'll try to move through these to at least get it started here. Are there any more specific writing exercises you can share for idea generation, writing prompts? That's a question for the whole panel.
You set a timer for 10 minutes. You keep putting words on the page. You're not allowed to lift the pen off the page, and you just write a whole lot of really bad ideas.
Okay. And I guess you would say thank you to yourself after that for doing it? Because I like how your producer self and writer self talk to each other. Okay, finding time between full-time job and writing. Good question.
Oh, God. You gotta be okay to be exhausted and do it. I mean, I have a sort of a full-time job. I'm an actor. I'm a mom. I don't have a sitter really. So it's a hustle. What I would say is make your expectations doable, but know that you got to put in the work. So if you're on the subway, do a little writing on the subway. Instead of watching maybe Real Housewives, do a little, I don't know if anyone ever watched that. Do a little writing instead of that. If you have a kid, I would write I would not do the laundry when my son was napping. I wrote an hour, even if it was a half an hour or an hour. That's what I would say. And it always made me feel good, even though I was exhausted. So it's okay to start small in that sense of just a small amount of time, as long as you can like get it done. Just be realistic so you don't feel bad about it, make yourself feel bad. So that's what I would say about that.
Realistically, for me, the actual writing time, if I look at it, is like 2-3 hours at a time is mostly all you can ever give yourself anyway. I think we're really hard on ourselves and say, well, I need a full day or I need all this time.
Yeah.
And realistically, you're not going to do that. So setting aside the afternoon on a weekend to spend a little time with yourself in a special place that you feel comfortable and happy to write with across from someone who's going to keep you company. Yes. Anything like that you can do, program that for yourself and do it and forgive yourself if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. So Joyce asks, should the first short be a solo piece? That's interesting.
The first short should be something that you're really excited to make.
Yeah.
And if that's a solo piece, then yes. And if it's not, then not. You want to write a whole bunch of bad short scripts. Don't produce the first thing you write. It's not going to be your best writing. Write a lot of shit. You know, gardens grow from poop. So create a lot of poop. And that's how you're going to grow these flowers. Write at least 5 shorts before you decide to put all that energy into producing one. And you're going to know, follow the fun, you're going to find that script that's a must make. You're going to write that short, it's like, oh, that one I got to make. Yeah.
You can also remake things you made. I made a short later that the germination of that idea, germination? All of a sudden I was like, what?
Sure. Yeah.
That's weird. Yeah. That idea started when I was like 21 and I made a really crappy version of it in school. And then I made a much better version of it like 10 years later. So nothing is ever finished either. You can always go back.
That's great. How does a writer create the dialogue of a character outside of the writer's own perspective?
Every character is in your perspective. Even when they have conflicting perspectives, arguing with each other, you're in your character's shoes. And it's such a cool thing that you have to do as a writer is be in every character's shoes. Sometimes I'll write a scene where I'm clearly in one character's shoes and the other character is kind of two-dimensional and it reads that way. And then I'll go back in terms of revision and I'll be like, now I'll put myself in that character's shoes. And I'll rewrite the scene and then it'll kind of, you know, snap, crackle, pop. But you're in every character's shoes. Every character's shoes. They can be, you know, have the worst politics you've ever heard. They can be the worst human being you've ever written. You're still in their shoes. There's something about them that's in you, which is why you're writing that character.
I would also say that I would repeat what I said earlier about who you surround yourself with. And there's a reason why there's so many shows for so many years are so white and so male is because that was who's in the room writing them. And we're over that now. And that's why these shows, like if you watch the Emmys, we're over it a long time ago, but now Hollywood's catching up finally. If you watch the Emmys this year, you see that the shows that were rewarded were perspectives that hadn't been seen that much before. And so Lena Waithe from Master of None is like, that was such a brilliant episode. It was so simple. It was so, like we were saying before, it wasn't like original. It was just a coming out story, but told through her lens. And that's why it's time for stuff like that to be happening, because if you're surrounding yourself with people, if your writer's room is diverse and full of different kinds of people that can speak to your story, that's going to help those voices pop.
So I'm going to have one more question because I want to get a chance to make sure everyone knows how to contact you and what you're working on right now as we wind down. So this is from Tony. He asks, do you ever write a film script that has no dialogue?
Sure.
All right. So,
in fact, it's a really good writing exercise. You're looking for writing exercises, write a scene with no dialogue. And sometimes I tell my students to write the big final battle with no dialogue because, you know, it's what we do. It's our actions that really show who we are. It's not the things we say. So definitely write a scene without dialogue at some point just to see what that's like. But the story, speaking is an action. Stories are like a series of actions, and speaking is just one kind of action. They're, you know, movies are about what people do. It's not what people say.
Behavior.
Anyone else want to say anything?
All I was going to say is I got into short filmmaking through music videos because I grew up such a huge music fan and became a music journalist. And what got me interested in storytelling in that way was music videos, which are largely dialogueless. It's the song that's fueling it. But I think that can be really instructive too. I mean, I'm a kid of the 90s, so that's obviously a huge part of it. But if you go back and watch music videos from that era specifically, that's an auteur era in music video making too. So that can be a really instructive thing for short filmmakers too. Like the Michelle Gondrys and the Spike Joneses, they were making music videos in the 90s. So that's pretty cool. You can find out a lot about short filmmaking from those.
I am just so excited, and I can't wait when this comes out to watch, and I'll be like, okay, what do they say about this and that? I just feel like this has just been so full of wonderful ideas. I will hang on to the questions that everyone handed in, and as Melissa was saying, as this series continues so that we can address all aspects as much as we possibly can from the start, where that is tonight, on through being able to have something that is complete. I want to thank you three so much for all your information. And if you could please just let us know what you're working on or where we will find you.
Sure. So I currently teach at UCB. I teach Character 101, which is coming up with your own characters. So it's an 8-week course there. And I also teach acting for sketch there as well. I perform there once a month called Couple Skate, where we pair up people who don't know each other to do 7-minute scenes, and we're always looking to open it up. It used to be just like UCB folks, but we've gotten writers and actors and people who do sketch, never improv, and Broadway not. So even if it's something that you're here today and you're nervous to do, let me know. And I'm, writing and raising my son, really. And my website, if anybody wanted to email me, on my website is all my contact info. It's just my name at lesliemizell.com. That's it. Is the website, not the email address. Oh, Leslie, Leslie, Meisel, Meisel. It is. I am that. I am the University of British Columbia.
That's my alma mater. No joke.
No?
University of British Columbia is my alma mater.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. Yeah, sorry. I thought I said that earlier, but now I get the connection. I was like, I don't know where he got that with my name, but
Yeah, sure.
yes,
There
and.
you go. A lot of grounds.
No, UCB, yeah, is the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. The theater, there's 2 theaters, one on 26th and 8th, which is not right around the corner from here. And the other one is on the Lower East Side. What was that? 4th Street and Avenue A. Yeah, East Village. So come on out.
Ella?
Elatier.com is where you'll find my films. It's a weird spelling because I'm an immigrant. It's E-L-A is my first name, and T-H, like Thomas, I-E-R is my last name. And my new film, Tomorrow Ever After, will be on Amazon and iTunes in December. And I teach screenwriting, directing, and producing under the alias of the Independent Film School. So if you Google the Independent Film School, put in my name, and you'll find me. The Independent Film School. The Independent Film School. I started that school about 11 years ago, and it's rocking out.
Caitlin?
My website is CaitlinFontana.com, K-A-I-T-L-I-N-F as in Frank, O-N-T-A-N-A, so like Montana, but with an F. CaitlinFontana.com. And I'm working on my pilot. The fellowship is wrapping up in the next little while, and then I'll be taking it out to sell. Thank you. And in the meantime, like I say, I created and host a feminist late night show called The Box, which we'll have our season premiere on October 28th at 8 p.m. Doors open at 7 at Littlefield in Brooklyn. And you can follow me on Twitter at Caitlin Fontana, and a lot of my current stuff is there, plus some jokes.
Great. Well, I want to wish everyone happy writing. Get started. Don't forget this stuff. And look at the video if you need to get re-inspired. And please, let's give a warm round of applause to our wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. Go do it. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.